What's up, guys? You're listening to Supercar Stories, the fast business podcast with Jeff Yew, founder of Monochrome Asset Management and ex-CEO of Binance Australia. We've got Matt Higgs here as well.
Hey guys, how you going? Thanks very much for having us.
You're welcome, Matt. Andrew Beckett. And Mitch Sanders, who's joined the team as well as part of the Supercar Stories podcast. How you doing, Mitch?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me here. So we've got some cool stuff to chat with Jeff about, and then we'll get into some more topical stuff. But I guess straight off the bat, Jeff, the point of the podcast is what's your story around the cars? Like, nice car, what's the story in a longer form version? So you're driving around in one of the most notorious McLarens on the Gold Coast. Got a GT3 Cup car out there. There's a lot of supercars around your general presence. So can you give us a bit of a rundown on your life story and your passion for cars and how you got into the scene?
Yeah, so thanks. So my passion for cars started when I was a boy, like everyone, sort of seeing, actually the first car that inspired me was a Lamborghini. So something like that rocked up. It's one of those dinners with, the dad's friend circles and things like that, and people always try to pull up a nicer car than the other guy. And then this family friend brought one of the first Aventador when it was first launched in Malaysia, and it's like the craziest car I've ever seen. Right, took pictures in it and everything, and the rest is history. So that sort of comes back to like where I'm from. So I'm born in Malaysia. I'm Malaysian Chinese. So I grew up there, and I sort of went to Singapore to study, and then sort of like continue on in Australia, and started working here, and then the sort of like grew from there from there on. So my perspective on life is kind of from is basically a bit more diverse. So growing up in Malaysia, Singapore, and Australia, you sort of seen how a lot of our parts of our lives are sort of governed by, basically the government, right? But there's some places where there's good governance, there's some places where governance are hard to trust because they break the trust over and over again. So something like money has always been the topic that I'm very fascinated in, not just from its sort of like how many Lambos you can buy, but from a perspective of like what is actually money? Because that's a question that we don't actually ask ourselves a lot, whereas we spend our life chasing and stacking this thing. But throughout my life journey, it sort of taught me that something like Bitcoin didn't make a lot of sense from a money that's free from human governance. We'll go into that deeper later on, but sort of keep it short. I think I attribute my worldview to sort of my background, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, cool. And buying 7 Lamborghinis as well.
7.
You were giving us some snippets earlier of some of the new cars that you've got coming. And is that something you want to talk about on the podcast today, or?
I think sort of not as important as what we will go into. Obviously, the car part is fun. It's a fun part of life, right? You still got to enjoy. You still got to spend the money that you've earned, because you're not going to bring it to the grave, like many people say. It's very true. Yeah. So like I focus more on experiences. So one of those eye-openers thing that I did this year was going on the Experience Neve. So that's Snow Driving Academy that Lamborghini organizes every year. That's in Livigno in Italy. That's basically where you can drive and drift and all sorts of things with basically the road Lamborghini. They had the STO, they had the Technica, they got the Urus Performante, the new one, and also they got the all-wheel drive Evo. Yeah. So we've drove those cars over the course of 2.5 days. One of which they brought the Sterrato out. That's the first time I've seen the Sterrato with the last V10 Lamborghini that has sort of like higher jacked up, and it's got this loud fender and also there's 2 headlights in the front. Like if you don't know better, you would think some crazy guy has done some mods with Lambo. Yeah. So that sort of brought me to, because I was coming from a 765 LT, right? Very good, very fast road car. I mean, you can basically call it a track car for the road for many reasons. I brought it to the track, love it. I think it's a very capable car. So when I went on this trip to Italy, I realized that there's more than just driving fast cars, straight on and through corners. there's actually places that you can't actually bring out the rawness of the car. And some of these places are like the snow and how well it handles like that. So I basically was convinced that I wanted my next car to be something that I can experience more than just driving straight down fast, because I've been there, done that. It's not exciting. It's not as exciting for me anymore. So I basically just, got the dealer to hook me up with one. I was lucky to be able to get that allocation early on. So that Sterado is coming hopefully sometime next year.
Wow, that is cool.
That's really cool.
I have to take that one down to the snow.
Yeah.
Well, the sad thing is that you don't get to sort of drive it in Australia like that. So I think each time you got to bring it to the sand even, you got to make sure that you book an appointment back so that they strip the whole car down, clean it, put it back together, which is a very expensive exercise. But with snow, you don't get a problem because it just melts away.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see on Fraser Island or...
So are these like designated days that you're going to do for that kind of driving, or does Lamborghini host that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, so from my understanding, they would host a few events like that throughout the year for Sterado owners coming up, but it's just more in general. Like the more you enjoy, the finer things in life, the more you realize that it's not what something costs. It's not what something, how fast it goes and all this kind of stuff. It's about what it makes you feel as an experience, because you only get to live for so long. Sort of, God forbid, like you're healthy for so long, you'll be able to do all this crazy stuff when you're young. So why not just experience as much as you can in different sort of things, right? Obviously the fast car, I think everybody can experience like a fast car on a track. It's just unbelievable. But there are certain things in life that maybe like off-roading, soft-roading, everything like that in the car, and not just in cars, maybe other aspects of life with your family, with your loved ones, your friends.
Yeah, it's a really profound point of view, I think. Like, especially in this scene, like the car scene, it's like, oh, what's that worth? What's this worth? What's that worth? What's this worth? When it seems like your perception and perspective is more about like what experience can I get out of it and what memories can I have while I'm here before, God forbid, my health gets bad or my knees go out and I can't drive a car anymore. So, it's cool. I like the perspective.
It's cool to hear someone say that too, because a lot of the time, supercar owners get a bad stigma that they've bought these cars to make themselves look cool or whatever it may be, when realistically it's about the experience that car brings. And I saw some of the footage of you out in the snow in that in the Urus, and man, you look like you're having a ball. I saw one of the clips too. You got a little bit close to one of the walls.
Actually hit the wall. And
that was me being polite about it. But
the back of the car was off the air. I sort of went wide in the last corner there in the ice, but the snow was pretty good. I'm not sure if it's a snow wall that's soft or the Lambo that is tough, but
they put it there just in case. So if you hit it, it's like, no, it's all right, it's just a bit of snow.
Yeah.
It's funny, right? Because like when it's not your car, you kind of obviously push it a little bit further, and you want to see the limits of every car.
Yeah.
So I've I'm not a bad driver, but I've put every car during those few days into the wall, into the pit, because I wanted to push the limit as far as I can. Because they told us that if you crash, if it's not your fault, like you covered. So I was like, I'm gonna sort of drive it to a point that I can test the limits of the cars without worrying that I got to replace a front bumper and whatnot. But because it was also in the snow, your average speed are not that high. You just feel you're going quick, a lot of wheel spin and things like that. So in terms of impact wise, it's not as bad as what you would get on a track, for example.
Yeah. How was the feedback from a four-wheel drive sliding versus like a rear-wheel drive? Did you get any rear-wheel drive stuff out there?
Yeah, so we did. So the both Technica and the STOs are rear-wheel. So the Urus Performante and the Evo all drives were all-wheel drives. So you get the sort of experience that, obviously with the rear-wheel drives, you got to be more precise with your steering and your speed and how you control the throttle. And with the all-wheel drives, like it basically hides a lot of your mistakes. You get, you spin off less, things like that. But overall, the experience was quite enjoyable. You're not just going around the track. They let you do figure eights, or they call, the maneuvers that we'd see in James Bond films and things like that. Actually, they call it a 007 because you spin 2 times or something like that. But it was fun. Overall, you got to experience all the different cars in a terrain that you would never get experience in Australia, I would argue.
Why do you think that is, other than the terrain? You think the just the local government and doesn't like that sort of activity in Australia. Like we're labelled hoons pretty quickly if you're into cars. And that's something that
Jim Turner wasn't allowed here because it's bad publicity for the car culture in Australia.
Yeah. Like we told Ken Block he couldn't come here. Like how ridiculous is that?
Yeah. So I think we all drive quite safely on the road, right? When there's rules and everything we follow. But that's sort of a place for everything. So I think like on a track you can drive. Obviously you still got to be careful with people around you, but you can drive way above what you would normally, in terms of speed on the road. You get to sort of whack the car left and right. How it sort of grips the corner. Even if you go a little bit wide, you're not into someone else's car, or someone else walking there. There's no pedestrian on the track. From a snow track perspective, I think there's more logistics and also maybe a demand kind of issue. The track in Italy that Lambo uses it's been there for a while. It's actually even in National Geographic. Like it tells you how they actually prepare the track and people lease it out over the winter and things like that. So I think in Australia you probably have like few places that you can realistically do that, but at scale and also the commercial aspect of it is probably just not there for something like this to happen.
Yeah.
So I guess those rules don't really apply with your McLaren pulling into the Boatworks car park.
I don't know what they're talking about.
No comment.
Let's leave it there. That was an inside joke.
So Jeff, there's a video there. The guys have pulled it up.
Here we go.
Is that Jeff's Instagram? Is it?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that was, if I recall
was
correctly,
that the Perf? Yeah,
there might be definitely it's a Huracan, right? So Well,
Man,
video evidence.
super jealous. That looked like a hell of a lot of fun.
How long ago was that? Sorry.
That's actually in the end of January, so just about 2-3 months ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
What an
if
experience.
anyone wants to see that footage, they can follow you at it's at Jeff Yew.
Yeah, Jeff Yew _. That's on Instagram.
Yeah, cool. Oh, sweet. Yeah, some good footage there. I enjoyed watching that. So tell us about you came through in the crypto space and you had the role of the CEO of Binance Australia. How did that come about? And was that part of a master plan to, achieve a certain status or get to a certain level of success, or was it an organic thing that you just sort of fell into? Or
I think you got to understand, a couple of years ago, the space was not as, I would say, well accepted as it is today. And Binance, there are people that are pro and against Binance today, but in the past, there were people, that were kind of skeptical when Binance starting rising so quickly. So we had nothing to do with Binance in the beginning. So we were just running our own OTC over the counter trades as a small sort of focused exchange over here. And Binance saw the opportunity, came on board. So I think sort of culturally we hit off, sort of everything sort of lines up. So we got the opportunity to work with them. Slowly, sold more and more part of the business to them. To a point when I left, that's sort of when the entire Australian exchange was sort of given to Binance to run themselves. So it was an interesting journey, sort of building a foreign brand cryptocurrency exchange in Australia, because there was a lot of incumbents already here in Australia, all the names that you guys are familiar with, and people are very sticky to those platforms. And we sort of managed to turn around people's perception on sort of why there's actually the need for something like this to exist. I think one of the two reasons why Binance Australia was successful in Australia is because it's actually one of the first good order book exchanges that you get in Australia. So in terms of pricing and hidden fees and poor order book management, this thing doesn't exist on the Binance platform as much as it does on the smaller exchanges, or some even the local big exchanges, doesn't really get that absolutely right. So from more sort of trading perspective, people eventually seek to Binance. We got a day trader here. He might share the experience that eventually, all road leads to Rome. You want a place where the best liquidity and the best pricing.
There was also no Australian derivatives exchange at that time as well, which Binance was the first.
Yeah, they weren't offered in. I under what we were running as Binance Australia. That was brought on much later on after I left. So that derivative thing is a different story. I think derivative trading in crypto is very risky, and I argue it's more risky than most form of gambling, because cryptocurrency itself is very volatile. It is an asset class that if you don't know what you're doing, or even if you know what you're doing, there's real risk of harm for the everyday investor. Not just on your own merit, like you're just a poor trader, but also most of these platforms and exchanges are unregulated in Australia. So anything that can happen, like what happened with FTX, can also happen to a lot of these other crypto exchanges in Australia, because the frameworks that overlooks how they're operating, how what sort of consumer protection they have in place, what sort of capital adequacy or even experience of actually running a business like that. Like these are all just self-regulatory in Australia for crypto exchanges. So but that being said, Australia's AUSTRAC, which is a anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing watchdog for sort of all these transactions, does look into cryptocurrency exchanges for that purpose of making sure there is no illicit enabling of all this proceeds of crime to transfer in and out through crypto in Australia. So that part is properly governed. I think they've done a good job with that. But from a broader sort of consumer protection standpoint, it's sort of missing at the moment for crypto exchanges.
So that comes into Monochrome now.
Yeah, so I get this. I almost forgot about the second part or third part of the more important part of the story, right? How did Monochrome come about? So I was running the exchange. So we've gotten to a point where we were the most liquid, with the most volume trading volume wise from a crypto exchange perspective. So we naturally get a lot of attention from a lot of big traders. They're not necessarily individuals. They might be prop desks, there might be companies or big sort of funds like that. And the question come about that if we want to do this properly, that means that from a fiduciary perspective, if I'm not taking money off my own to trade, I'm actually running my family's money or my fund. How do I do it properly in Australia? Because until very recently, Australia does not have a very clear path for crypto assets or crypto to be offered under a financial product. Before
it's
October,
still got plenty of a way to go, but it's so much better now than it was like 4 years ago.
Yeah, so each year it gets better. So we started to get a lot of market feedback of how we can actually build something like Monochrome to Australia before we founded it. So I was crazy enough to want to pursue that path. So it's about 2.5, 3 years on now, I think. We're leading the country's only and one of the first in the country's only retail authorized crypto asset funds in Australia, crypto asset fund in Australia. That's called the Monochrome Bitcoin Trust. So it's actually very remarkable that in Australia today, you got a very robust regulatory framework that specifically authorizes for crypto, Bitcoin is in this particular case to be offered to retail clients through a financial product. I think most people most people listening to this podcast probably do not understand the significance of that. But let me tell you that it is very significant in Australia to have something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's it has a lot of gravity, the fact that you've been able to achieve that. Was it a long process?
Yeah, it's because when you operate in a regulatory environment versus an unregulated environment, right? I think most people that have been to this podcast have run businesses, and you will have people that say operate in a field that is regulated, and yet there's a unregulated component of it. Might be solar panels, might be this, might be that. And crypto is the same thing. And you get as a operator that runs everything in a more regulated fashion, your cost of doing business is very high, significantly higher, and also time to get things done, approvals, license applications or revisions will take a long time. Whereas if you're operating in an unregulated environment, it's kind of a race to the bottom and see who can get away with the cheapest way of operating without messing the whole thing up.
Exactly. Right? And everyone gets a bit greedy on the way down.
Yeah. And I guess it's the same in any industry, like whether you're a plumber or electrician or someone, because the ones that are cheaper are generally without a license, and because they don't have a license, they can give a much cheaper option, but it's never as good as what something that's fully regulated with a license. Absolutely.
Yep.
So with that in mind, the modern entrepreneur, would you suggest getting into cryptocurrency in today's economy in terms of investing or accepting Bitcoin for payment? Because it's something that I've thought about across my businesses, and I haven't taken the leap, but Monochrome's definitely piqued my interest and maybe thought maybe it's a little bit better system than our current currency system. I'd love your input on where you see like the general population going with it, because there's been some pretty big leaps and bounds in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, usually when people ask me all the time, I actually get DMs and stuff like that. It's like, should I buy Bitcoin? What do you think about Bitcoin's price? And I usually always tell them that if you're asking the question like that, you're probably not ready for Bitcoin. Because what we hate to see the most is that people buying Bitcoin not knowing what they're getting into, or actually like anything. If you're buying something that you don't understand, and as a person that say yes you should, or yes whatever, you risk becoming that villain, right? It's like if it turns out to be something that the person is not expecting what this is to be, and it sort of becomes negatively impacts their life or their portfolio, like you become the villain of this story. And I've always tell people that, look, Bitcoin is not for everybody. It's very important that there's a few cardinal rules, right? It's like Bitcoin is not for everybody. Same as stocks, same as bonds, same as real estate, they're not for everybody. There's a particular type of people, particular risk appetite, and knows how to risk manage, and the knowledge that they have in a particular asset class should deal with it. The second thing I tell people is that do not confuse Bitcoin and crypto. Because and this is actually consistent to what our regulator has said in one of their, ASIC actually has a podcast. Funnily, we're doing this, but our top financial regulator actually has a podcast that most of you guys should listen to. There's a few crypto episodes and one of the things that they said in there is that it's a mistake to confuse Bitcoin and crypto, or sort of think Bitcoin and crypto are the same, because Bitcoin is very different from what crypto is. We'll go into that deeper, and maybe through questions like that you get a bit more answer from that. But to answer your question, it's like whenever someone asks me like, should they buy Bitcoin, I always throw back the question. It's like, why do you want Bitcoin for? Like, what is your purpose of it? So it's from there you kind of go on from what the person's trying to achieve, and sometimes the answer might not be Bitcoin, might be something else. Or sometimes they might just go, aha, this is something that I've been looking for. Show me the best way to do it. And then, ta-da, we have the best way and most secure way to do it possible in Australia. Yeah. So that's my approach usually.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Interesting. And what's your thoughts on the wider view things that will change if Bitcoin is taken up by the wider community and becomes like a daily use currency, or things like that? You know what I mean?
So sort of like I'll say sort of very the short version. I'll say the long version, right? The short version says that Bitcoin is not a currency today. People say that they're currency today, they're kidding themselves. Like Bitcoin may become a currency, but it has to be worth a lot more than what it is today to be a stable currency. Because it's still in this early, in gestation period as a nascent asset class. There's a lot of things that you need to go through, because there's no CEO of Bitcoin, there's no central bank of Bitcoin to make it stable for its use as a currency today. It has to go through that volatile period to be able to get there. Yeah. But in short, like people are buying Bitcoin today, they're not buying it because they think it will be a currency. If they do, they're wrong. They're buying Bitcoin because they're betting that Bitcoin will become a currency one day, which means that by nature, prerequisite, it has to be worth a lot more than what it is today. And give you sort of like what I think will sort of to understand what will happen, you got to look back further into human history, right? So we as a civilization, so what differentiates us from monkey? So this is actually a book, Sapiens. The book's actually very good. So it talks about like what makes humans humans, right? The ability for us to actually convince another human that there's something that doesn't exist, and the other person will believe it. So example is a monkey will be able to explain that there's crocodile in the water, don't go near and everything. But only a human can convince another human that there's an elephant in the sky, there's a lion with wings, and people believe that shit, right? Nothing wrong with that. because it's actually one of the humanity's biggest strengths is that for us to be able to come together as a group of people through stories. And this is why
Supercar Stories.
Humans evolve as humans rather than sort of like feral animals. And the downside of that is that because humans are able to band together with stories, and the stories are not based in sometimes they're not based in hard facts or provable facts. It might be based on a derivative of a version of history. So there's a lot of contention of what that truth is. Over time, you get one religion become many, within that many religions, you might get even more diverse sort of opinions and worldviews. Money is the same thing, right? How we sort of come together with money is obviously money is a belief that something is worth something in the future, so that I can sort of store it today. I can maybe buy your car in the future, right? It's a belief system like the US dollar. Like US dollar is not backed by gold. It's not backed for anything. It's backed by the belief that the US, would go to war to preserve their dominance of the currency, right? Which is what people fear, what's happening today. But throughout time, before US dollars, before gold, there was commodity-based money. So people trade in whatever that is more rare, hard to produce, and the term called unforgeable coastlines. So for us as a tribe to be convinced that something is valuable and is the most valuable thing that we can find, it has to fulfill certain properties that would be money, right? Things that are hard to find, things that are provably hard to find, like maybe for a particular place might be a big stone, maybe a particular place might be a type of seashells, whatever it is. But over time, when these different tribes try to do business together, right? You got obviously like the guys with the seashells, the guys with the stones, and guys with the this and that, the glass tulips or the glass beads, and you can't agree on what to use as a sort of like a unified currency, because the seashell guys will say that, hey, use my seashells, right? Then the
seashells are worth so much. And the tulip guys like, no, my tulip guys are worth heaps.
And the stone guys are like, why would I use the seashells? Because you can just create more and I can't, right? Yeah. Use my stones. But so over time, we went from commodity-based, localized monetary beliefs into gold. So the gold came out as there was probably a time where gold was at where Bitcoin is today. When people look at it, it's like, well, it's it's just a yellow metal rock. Like it's not as useful as glass beads and not as pretty. You gotta do this and that with it. You can't eat it, so what's the point of the gold, right? And we're kind of in that phase of Bitcoin today, where people are using different fiat currencies, and different fiat currencies are now arguing which should be the dominant one now, right? It's all this,
which you're seeing right now with the de-dollarization of the US and everything going on there.
And it's actually a very dangerous thing. Like if that gets wrong, it can easily lead to war, right? To preserve the monetary dominance. So with when gold emerges, it was a de facto commodity that everybody agreed that this thing is the hardest to produce or the rarest, and the combination of that other different factors, and people shifted from a commodity-based sort of seashells and all this stuff, monetary faith, into gold as a monetary faith. Like gold's, what is this monetary faith important, right? Because gold's actual utility value represents a very small portion of what it actually is value. The rest is what we call a monetary premium. It's a premium that people make up and convince themselves, or togetherly convince themselves that it's worth this much more because it's valuable, right? Same thing as the dollar, same thing as Bitcoin. It's a belief system. So we've gone through from commodity based to gold, and I'll tell you sort of why gold failed as well, right? So when gold entered the computer era, when people are in charge of inputting how much gold you have and I have, you went from a monetary belief that is backed not by nature but backed by humans again. And if you trust me to tell you how much gold you have in my my clearinghouse or my repository, then you should trust how much I'll tell you this paper is worth, of how much of this gold is here, right? So eventually we move from gold itself to a fiat currencies that's backed by gold, and slowly the fiat currency is no longer backed by gold in 1971, and it leads to sort of what it is today. So gold has filled the role of living or moving into the digital age. It's great in the analog age because you can see it, you can feel it, But
it's divisible.
Yeah, it's divisible and things like that. But in an environment where you need computers to represent what that goal is, you then become reliant on the laws of humans, the laws of people.
Which is trust.
The laws of people are not usually very good, from history. With sort of laws of nature, something like, I'll give an example. Like if I'm a billionaire and someone next to me, is a guy on the street, and we both fall from the 80th floor of the building. Like I can't just go to the law of gravity or the CEO of gravity, say that, hey, I'll pay you whatever money you want and, slow me down and things like that. The laws of gravity are the laws of gravity. The laws of nature are unchangeable. You might be able to change it, but it will cost you a lot of money to do it, right? So when we went from laws of nature back monetary beliefs into now human faith monetary beliefs, we've got fiat currencies today, and it's actually not a very the fact that fiat currencies exist today is actually a blip of how things are in the history of human civilizations. So now we've come to a point where the faith in a lot of the human backed monetary beliefs are fading. Places like in Lebanon, places like Argentina, which has like hyperinflation like 3 times in people's lifetimes, right? And people can no longer trust that. And not because they don't trust the concept of money, they can't trust the people that backs the money, right? So we kind of gone from that, and why Bitcoin was created. Now, Bitcoin was created because it was actually written by Satoshi that because the trust that is required for the fiat system to run, it's heavily relying on these people that you no longer trust, and that is the problem. Gold actually failed to be transcribed into that because an asset that is natively analog cannot be natively digital without a central party that tells you what it is. Bitcoin was created, and the reference of Bitcoin was actually a few early gold projects and gold tokenized projects, and why it failed. E-gold, DigiCash, and things like that, and why it failed, because you always need a central human party to ensure a pack of the asset. Satoshi created a solution. It's like, let's just create something from scratch. Let's just bootstrap a digital gold that is not backed by anything, so it doesn't need a central person or central party to tell you what it's worth, and let it float organically. And that's why Bitcoin was created. So whether we've entered to an era where you get a lot of all these different superpowers are, the sort of effects of the dollarization is that you see a lot of this more, the second, third tier nations of, back in terms of dollar dominance is trying to enter and trying to say that goes back to the thing is like, use my glass bit and use my stones, right? Will we see either one of them become a thing, or will we see a digital version of gold basically came into the picture, like how gold came into the picture then? And the digital version of gold today, the best candidate we have is Bitcoin, no doubt.
It's mind blowing. Like I'm not into trading all that much myself, so listening back and just digesting everything that you've just said, it really is. It just opens up your mind big time, and there's so much more homework to do for me personally. But I'm in awe. And that was just after 5 minutes conversation of it.
It's interesting, hey?
It really is.
From somebody who actually knows.
He's got the inside scoop, so to speak. To one of the average Joes that is not into that space quite a lot compared to some of the other boys that are here. Like they do some trading. That's unreal.
It's interesting though how many people are going to have to all agree on one particular thing, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever it is. There's a lot of people across the globe that have got to agree on, hey, this is what we're going to use now. And there's pros and cons to that, and just hope we're on the right side of it. And I think that's sort of why I asked the question, because it wasn't so much, should I go out and buy Bitcoin? And by the way, after the conversation you've just had, I'm going to go buy some more. But no, like it's more the concept. Like there's a lot of guys now questioning the value of money. Where does it come from? And because this is stuff not taught in schools. And a lot of our audience, young guys and girls out of school questioning, hey, why am I going to university? Why am I working 3 jobs just to pay for rent and be able to live, and then I've got no time to myself? I don't want to sign up to that for 40 years, 40 plus years.
Oh, and the rest,
and
the rest,
And it's really shaping like the generation, because we've got like the easy way of making money now. You got your guys and girls on OnlyFans because that's a quick way to make $1. But at the moment, you know what I mean? But this is something that's going to shape.
It's a trend, and it's going to change, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean that leads kind of a perfect segue into like the de-dollarization. You said that it's actually scary. It's a bad thing that's going on. Like the US has been really in control of the reserve currency for, I think it's 30 or 40 years now. And there's a lot, like as you would see on crypto Twitter, everyone's like rooting for the US to get dethroned and BRICS to be moving up and all these different other countries to start trading no longer with the United States. So you say it's quite dangerous that it's happening. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So like you got to go by the history of like what's stopping people from wanting to escape from the US dollar, right? There's a lot of attempts of countries that try to get away from the US dollar in the past, right? Gaddafi is one example.
Yes.
Right. And look what
Venezuela
happened.
Venezuela is another one when they tried to go to the gold standard.
And this is like because if you have two nations and one nation is able to print as much of that money as possible, and the other nation can only borrow from that, like you end up with a very disproportionate power play, right? That country is always going to be under what you call the monetary imperialism of the other, right? So you can never be as powerful or never surpass that because you're forever playing that game. So when different nations like China, like Russia, BRICS countries all coming together now and sort of like trying to sort of, I mean they're all singing Kumbaya together, or seemingly singing Kumbaya together now. But you also kind of sense that, the Russians doesn't want the Chinese to be the dominant currency and vice versa, and the Saudi Arabians and things like that. So without the US sort of stopping, having that feet on the ground, like it's a good and bad thing, right? For the US to be so powerful that people do not dare question or challenge it, is actually, in a way, you sacrifice the sort of issue of monetary imperialism to the rest of the world, and for the benefit of peace and prosperity. Arguably, the US has not done so that much. In theory, it should, right? But the fact that it's caused so much problems, why I think it's such a big problem is because if the US dollar is no longer the dominant one, that's going to be a wars to arms, not to defend from the US, right? It's also to fight who can be the next dominant currency. And these are superpowers with nuclear options. And we don't want to sort of see it go to that point, right? So, and also like what happens with the other countries as well. Like what do we do? So, like for example, like Malaysia is taking sides now. A couple, just many years ago, it's always been like US is this and that, but now they've taken a big investment from China, and now it's saying that they're ready to ditch the US dollar for China's yuan for trading. So you start to see a lot of these sort of developing countries are taking sides now, and it's kind of becoming a war of who can actually control the most number of people, and in terms of getting that strength up. But what's important to realize is that if you got India, you get China, you get a lot of Asian countries that are no longer respecting the US dollar, you basically have more than half of the world out of that system. And what it means to the demand of the US dollar is actually quite catastrophic from that, because the US has printed a lot of money since COVID, pretty much since sort of modern history. A lot of them. People don't realize how much they print, and because they have the petrodollar status, they can absorb that inflation to a lot of countries that still need the US dollar for trade. But now, when the demand for US dollar for trade is no longer needed, countries and big corporations, things like that, do not need to hold as much US dollars or at all in the reserves. Hence, the demand of the US dollars drop. Like we're probably seeing a challenge of how US is going to manage that sort of the inflation sort of hitting back into the shores, right? We've seen sort of in US the price of fuel has gone up, price of this and everything like that, and we're talking about double digits to 3 digits in terms of price inflation. I think that's going to get worse if things are still out of control, and it doesn't seem that the current administration is actually actively doing anything to stop that, or to to shore up the faith, because everything it's about faith. You got as a country, I think one of the things that US does the best is actually power projection. Like power projection, what it means is that when people criticize like why does the US spend so much on military and things like that, they don't even need that. They're like the military spend is like way bigger than the next few combined, but it actually stops people from messing with them. because it's like
They're the big alpha, right?
I can
flex.
The big alpha in
like,
the room. Yeah.
like I can afford to spend,
your country's GDP
FU money
on military
on something like
year.
this. Yeah. So it is a strategy that the country use, right? It's power projection. You need your ships to be as big as people think it is, so that they don't mess with you. Because the cost of retaliating to an attack is much higher than the cost that they spend to show up the front of how things looks in the outside. And this applies to business as well. This applies to a lot of people, and why some people choose to spend a lot of money on things that are very lavish. I mean, you can say that part of it is that a person likes it, but I think the part of it is also telling people that if I can afford to wear $1 million in my hand, I got more money somewhere, and you don't want to mess with me. So that
when you're after paying the $1 million on your wrist, and then unable to pay your rent, it's about priorities of where some of these people are, right?
It's all different. So I think going back to the topic is that I think we're quite an interesting moment. Like, I think most of us never live in a moment where the monetary dominance is challenged in such a way. How this would end, I think, it's going to end quite badly, to be honest. The US, my best bet the US can do is actually to roll everyone into a central bank digital currency. Which, by the way, I think is a very bad idea for freedom and for
FedNow and CDBC.
Yeah. So the problem that we see with like bank runs and things like that is because people have control of their money, right? Again, they can pull the money out of the system very quickly. They can choose to invest it elsewhere if they think that.
Which we've seen in recent weeks as well, with like Silicon Valley and Bank and Capital One on its way out as well.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things that that Janet Yellen actually said is like she was surprised at how fast people will be able to pull the money out from the system, right? So the only way for them to stop this at a bigger scale, like we're talking about, like even the big funds, people with like, big portfolios, then depositors in a bank are pulling out from U.S. investments, is to roll the currency to some kind of central bank digital currency, which enables them to exert a lot of control. Like, you're not able to withdraw your money that easily, or you got to play by a certain rule. I think from a human freedom perspective, central bank digital currencies are the worst thing ever that can happen to people, because it'll tell you maybe you have too much cold ones over the weekend. Now everything you spend will be taxed right from where you spend it, things like that. Or you go into the wrong party with the wrong people, now your money is freeze and locked. So that gives a lot of control about social engineering on a large scale on people's.
You're talking about like social credit score type stuff, like is happening in China.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's going to happen quicker than most people think in Australia.
I think it definitely will, especially seeing how COVID happened and how everything was just rolled out overnight. The other really interesting thing to think about, sorry for one sec, is around other currencies, there's, crypto Twitter loves talking about de-dollarization of the US and the petrodollar dying, but all these other currencies are actually pegged to the US dollar. So they are priced in US dollars. And if the US dollar was to get depegged, they would have a fair bit of turmoil in just trying to find, where their neutral level is. You've got countries like China that have been working really hard to pump their currency's value over years by doing a lot of what China does. So it's interesting to see your viewpoint. Like, you obviously have your ear to the ground more than most, and there's probably a lot of different analysts and people that speak to you. So.
Yeah, which I think that's why the market today with Bitcoin is very different to what in 17, right? 2017, 2018, it's very retail driven phenomenon. Like, and the market is way smaller than it is today as well. We're talking about like people that are just taking puns on, hopefully I put $1,000 in like a casino, I'll get $10,000 back or whatever, right? But the market in Bitcoin today and demand for Bitcoin today, we've seen that a lot of players have entered since. The BlackRocks, the Fidelities, the JP Morgans, they all have some sort of ways for their big clients to enter into the market. And that's in the US particularly. In Australia, not yet. Monochrome is probably the only one they can actually deal with, I think. But the point of saying this is that the phenomenon is very institutional and high net worth driven, and the investment mindset that people have on crypto is very different from the average retail punters, right? And they don't go into things saying that I want to 3x or 5x my portfolio with Bitcoin, right? Because they already made the money, they already got investment and everything you can imagine. It's about, and what we actually generally see in the conversation that's happened over the last couple of months, or maybe just a couple of weeks, how fast things are progressing with all these things, is that people are starting to realize that Bitcoin is one of the only assets, or maybe if the only asset that is globally liquid, globally recognized. It's basically fulfills a lot of what we call a globalized commodity. That is free from central banking risks and a lot of these policy risks that is tied to real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever. We've seen how interest rate affected a lot of the bond portfolio that all these banks were holding. That's why Silicon Valley Bank got into trouble in the first place. So it's more of a peace of mind for them right now, knowing that I have X amount of percentage of my net worth out of the system, where I don't really care if it goes to zero, because if it's 1% in portfolio, I lose 1%. I lose $1 out of my $100, right? But if something else goes to shit over here, I know that that's something that's going to be out of the system, that is immune to a lot of this shenanigans that's happening in the space. And I do not need to buy insurance for this, or buy insurance to insure my insurance. Basically, that's a huge mental gymnastic that you need to do in today's world to hedge their risks that they didn't used to. So they kind of gone to a point where they realize that it's just worth the risk of getting that peace of mind by having a certain amount of money allocated into an asset like Bitcoin. So it's very different. I think we have not seen the full turnover of when that floodgate is open. Because right now, a lot of these things are happening in the US. If you can see that BlackRock is into it right now, Fidelity as a product. We've even got some of the largest wealth advisors group in the US saying that they've seen these things that are consistent of what I'm telling you. In Australia, we're always a bit late, right? Late to the party. That's why I make sure that I want to set up something like that in Australia to make sure if that in that case happens, that demand rises. What demand actually is happening right now is that we have a floor valve for these high net worth individuals, institutions, retired people, or entrepreneurs, and things like that, to be able to do it correctly, not through a non-robust, unregulated Wild West, but in a properly regulatory approved structure that it has all the investor protection that they are used to, all the reporting structures that they're used to, but it's for Bitcoin.
Wow, that's a lot to ingest.
Definitely took you guys down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you seen Black Mirror on Netflix?
I love Black Mirror.
Yeah. The social credit score stuff's very Black Mirror-ish.
It's happening today in China. I think
it is.
There was some statistics, right? In 2018 alone, that's how long I've looked into it, because it hurts me to actually look into all this stuff. Like in 2018 alone, that's 28 million instances where someone in China could not pay for services like a train ticket or a plane ticket because their social credit score wasn't sufficient enough. It's probably gotten worse now, but I think this can happen more easily with something like a central bank digital currency, which is what even the RBA is pushing. It's good for them because they can control how easily money can get out of the system.
And it's
again,
like on
at
some level, it's
something.
already happening here. Like go and try and open a bank account, deposit money in it from an ATM, and then try and pull it out or get locked. It actually happened to me last week. And then you've got to go through this whole process to prove where the money came from. And
that's a bit different, though. That's more like just from a sort of risk requirement from the bank side, because there is definitely an increased level of scams.
Anti-money laundering and
not just
scams
anti-money laundering, but just general banking scams. People are pretending to be someone with all this data leaks. There's a lot of fake IDs around, real IDs, but maybe fake people controlling it behind. So there's this heightened level of security from all banks.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like things like Latitude getting hacked and Optus, and everyone's details is basically freely available for $29.99 on the dark web.
Yeah, so something like that. I don't know the details of that, but the thing about central bank digital currency is very different, right? It's about jumping the hoop from the banks, from the central bank, directly to the consumer. So currently, a bank reports to the central bank, and this banks deal with the customers, which is us. With central bank digital currencies, a lot of this control and monitoring can jump straight
There's
from
no
the central
buffer
bank.
between consumer and
Exactly.
central bank. Yeah.
Exactly. So in terms of setting policies, setting restrictions, engineering social behavior through the freedom of money, it can happen like that. Like the central bank can announce that we are restricting people who ate too much meat or bought too much meat from Coles last week to not be able to spend 50% of their savings or whatever, and then we can effect it, boom, like that. We don't even need to wait like days and days for the banks to start doing this and that for their customers. It's just instant. So it's a very scary future, and I think that if you think from a perspective that a lot of these comes down from how much they want control of a system that they know is weakening in terms of faith. People are pulling money out from the system. People are sort of diversifying out from that. It's about how you can lock people in, right? Will they continue to let people buy Bitcoin into the future? It's something that I think about a lot. I think you've seen a lot of countries that are very dictatorial. They usually ban people from buying Bitcoin. But again, it results in another big black market because people want it more usually. But whether that happens when in Australia or ever, is something that I always keep my eye awake on. So it's about I think it's about positioning your eggs carefully in terms of like how you store your wealth and how you position your assets. You don't want to keep everything in one basket, right?
Wallet off exchanges. Out of banks.
Oh, that's a good idea, but different topic, I think. Yeah,
definitely.
That's definitely something I've been thinking about though. Where to keep, like all my eggs, because you definitely don't want them in one basket. But there's so many baskets out there nowadays. Which one's safer than the other? It's really hard, and it takes a lot of no.
Put your eggs in my basket.
No.
Nothing's safe. It's all different degrees of risk.
Yeah, it is, and that's the scary thing. And I think it's all well and good for us to be talking about it, but there's a lot of mum and dads that are 50s, 60s plus that this is not even a thought pattern just yet. That too is going to affect the worst because you really need to be thinking about it. And there's a lot of people in this country at least hoping that their super is going to be there for when they retire.
Yeah,
and it's a big hope. Like who knows where or what it will be in 5-10 years time. So.
Or if it's even going to be there because it got drained because someone's all their information got leaked on a recent hack with Optus or whatever. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
It's definitely a scary world.
Bit depressing. So shall we shift the subject and go back to cars?
Back to cars.
Yeah, that's cars.
Yeah,
so we've got the GT3 Cup car behind us. There's not only this one, but there's also another one, isn't there?
Yeah, that's one in Sydney. This is the one in Gold Coast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Couldn't decide on the colour.
Do you want to delve into that a little bit? Tell us, because they're two different teams from what I understand. Is that right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. So we've started supporting the Porsche Carrera Cup Australia since the Bathurst round in 2021, where we got one car with Craig Lowndes and the other car with David Wall, which is the owner-driver of Wall Racing, which is the team that we support. In 2022, we did two cars as well. We did David Wall's car and also did Liam Talbot's car. This year, 2023, we're continuing on with David Wall's car, and that was a bit last minute on what's happening with the next car. So
that's one of the black ones.
That's one of the black ones.
Yeah,
I think
cool.
it's so great looking. That's where
I was going to say, which one's your favourite to look at?
I think both. Like I have something with the black and white because that's the same color that we kept on last year's and previous year's car.
Yep.
That one is a bit different. I think I love both. So Callum, which is the driver of this car over here, he's a young Kiwi driver, really getting really mature with his driving. He's done a lot of open wheeler now, and he's done really well in his racing career so far. And he sort of like we had sort of chatted on Instagram and saying that hey, would you like to support something like this in a Grand Prix round? And it's like why not? Let's do it, because we've always liked to make sure that we give back to this community, give back to the sport that we love. It gives me the same amount of joy to put money for other people to race cars than to drive myself, to be honest.
Really?
I just like being around the environment. It's the experience, the memories that you have. It's better to go in as a team and being in the pits and all the busy and hustle and bustle than just rocking up with their own helmet to a track, to QR, and just drive a lap and come home.
Yeah.
Like that's what I personally feel. So to be able to see the success of the drivers and the teams, especially with they're carrying the flags of the company or Monochrome, is actually very, very nice to see. We've done the Bathurst 12 hour. We have 3 cars there, and this year's we also did a lot of the signage, and on Skyline has a few crashes,
a few overpasses.
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting bit of
Skyline,
Skyline, because you get a lot of people going wide or things like that from Philippi Park, and then they crash to the wall that says Monochrome on it.
Good for business.
How does that come back? Like, do you find more organic Google searches from the footage that goes out, or do you find like it's just brand recognition with your existing customer base, or how does the big banners come back to you in terms of business?
So it shifted a bit. So obviously when we first went in as rookies, as motorsport sponsors, because it's a very interesting world, right? You kind of go like, oh, how much can I get from back of this and the yada yada, but then you realize that this is actually not directly about numbers. It's about the trust that you build with the people, the team. There are people that that basically, frankly, look at us as like, oh, is this another Bitcoin scams or things like that, because they've heard so many bad actors, doing in the space like that, and they just don't talk to us for the first year. Maybe the second year they say hi, and the third year is like, oh, you're still here, then let's talk. So it's about slowly building the trust. We operate in a space that, because everybody says they're regulated. That's a problem that Monochrome face. Or we have a very big problem where people come to us and tell us that, hey, Monochrome, you say you're regulated. They say they're regulated. The guy over the street says regulated. So who's actually regulated, right? And it's actually a very bad thing for the industry. Because there are people in the industry that are unregulated, that do not understand the consequences and the use of things like that, and they just keep telling people that they're regulated, but they're actually not. And other than if you work or you have experience as a financial professional, whether as an advisor or things like that, you would not be able to go into ASIC's database and the registries to verify what people say is true. I like to sort of point people to there, and sometimes on stories I'll tell people what is an AFSL, where can you find the authorization, what it actually mean. But most people don't go into the detail. They might say that, well, my business is registered with Austrac, which looks after the transaction monitoring for all this anti-money laundering stuff, but not with ASIC when it comes to financial products. But I call myself regulated because to a certain point. So that is we need to break that barrier, and we're still finding out the silver bullet for it. There's no easy answer until people sit down and talk to us. They do not actually know what the differences is. And once they know the differences, they go to aha. That's the moment that we see that the eyes light up. So with motorsports, it's about being consistent in the involvement of that. We obviously don't go crazy with our spending in that, because it's all it all has to make commercial sense. Spend within our means and things like that. But also being consistent. There's a lot of crypto sponsors that were in motorsports, jumped in the same year that we did, and in the bear market in 2022, they disappear. Right? And then you got feedback about, well, they promised us they're going to do this, but now they've done only this, and now they're pulling out. And it hurts us because, like, unlike most sponsors, like I'm down there at most of the races, right? The Grand Prix, I'm there. Most of the Bathurst round are there. Gold Coast, I was there. And a lot of these, test days and things like that. And you see that the money, where the money goes to. The people that are, fixing up the mechanics and things like that. People are fixing it. And if you promise them money and you don't pay up and you tear off your contracts midway, like, it's not just about the drivers, right? It's about people's livelihood and things that you got to be responsible for. So I think in the world of motorsports, especially the people that we deal with, we get quite a good reputation of being consistent. Like, good days, bad days, we show up. Where people in a market downturn, they tear out their contracts and back out, we're still there. Part of this comes down to planning for the worst, and also the actual love for the sport. It's not just something that we just do because a line of the number and a computer tells us or a consultant tells us to do, but we actually love to do this.
Yeah.
I'm a big car guy. we got one of our guys in the operations team. He used to race national go-karts. He's done well. He's got the Formula Renault and things like that. And that's sort of the pedigree of the Monochrome team. We just love cars.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's funny. Like you actually converted. Well, you definitely piqued my interest in what you're doing with Monochrome through the simple act of just showing up every day and posting informative stories and being involved in like very reputable things like the motorsport that you're involved in. So yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And watching your stories and just constantly seeing your macro updates, I really enjoy as well. Like what you see, because everyone has opinions, but a lot of the time it's just people following other people's opinions and they're resharing stuff. I've noticed that a lot of on your Instagram specifically, a lot of what you're sharing is really unique, and it's got your own, kind of point of view rather than just something that is regurgitated, which, as you know, in the crypto space it's rampant. There's so much regurgitated information, so it's really refreshing to see unique side of things from you.
Yeah.
Can we maybe touch on some of the team that you've got behind you? Because obviously Monochrome's your thing, but there's definitely a team behind you, and they're doing a fantastic job from the outside. You want to speak about some of the guys that you've got working?
Yeah. So the crypto-ness of the company stops with me, right? Like I'm the guy that is all about this, all about that, about Bitcoin. You can ask me any technical question or why Bitcoin this, why Bitcoin that, any sort of hard questions. I can probably pull an answer for you.
Bitcoin maxi, is that what they call you?
I'm more sort of pragmatist. I think like I've probably experienced so much in the space more than most people, to a point that you kind of get tired of seeing bad mistakes getting repeated again.
Yeah.
And you just kind of brush them off because you've seen this done before, and it looks like people didn't learn the lessons that are trying to do this again, and you just kind of brush it off and focus on what really matters, is to grow the other problem of people do not know that these things are starting to get regulated, what it means for them, yada yada. But that's sort of like the team that we have is very much traditional background focus. We got people from some of the big funds like IFM Australia. We got people like from BlackRock, on our operations team, and things like that, from Commonwealth Bank, Equity Trustees, some of these very traditional firms. Because ultimately what Monochrome is that we're not a crypto company that is dabbling in traditional products. We are a traditional asset manager that specializes in crypto assets. It's a very different thing, right? There's a lot of people that may have made money trading pictures of monkeys, and now they buy a license and they try to sort of portray themselves as like, we were just
they
fund
do the
manager
2
now.
and 20 and just knock on a bunch of doors and raise $2 million and call themselves a fund.
Yeah, exactly. But we're different. We take the approach that the appeal of what Monochrome represents in the product is that it is so robust that you probably can't find anything better else in the market. You can try, but you always come back to us because we got the best execution, we got the best benchmarking, we got the best, obviously, license that we adhere to. We got public insurance and all these things. The things that are really, really hard to get for most people that don't know what they're doing. So the team's done really. I'm very proud of my team. The team's done a lot of work. A lot of what you see is 2 years worth of work or a year and a half worth of work, and most people do not appreciate the significance of having something like what Monochrome is in the market, because it signals to the market that this thing is getting matured, and there's actually a way for people to do it the right way now. Previously, everything is unregulated, it's free for all. People get hurt, appears in the news 2 days later. People forget about it because another thing happened. But now, when it sort of come into the regulatory picture, it's about how we can access a lot of the money that you wouldn't otherwise touch crypto before.
Very cool.
Well, I think we've soaked up enough of your time, Jeff. We're nearly at 90 minutes, so we've managed to.
But we're just getting started.
It's a bit. It's a
I
bit
can
that
tell
way.
he's literally just warming the
You're
engine.
going to let the smoke out of my ears. I'm going to be like,
Yeah, I'm not going to sleep very well tonight. I've got too much going on, but maybe we should finish up with some advice you'd give some young entrepreneurs of today and
to people that are entering the crypto space as well.
So I think think for entrepreneurs, it's about how do you give back to the community? Because there's a lot of people that when your shoes, things like that, or trying to get to where you are, that do not have the support that you had, or the same support structures that you had in your time. So it's all about like, how do you identify good people and bring them up in the journey? Because like the worst feeling is to be successful and have no one to celebrate with, or have a bunch of very superficial people that celebrates with you. But if you bring up, your community, your people, and together, and then basically be successful in all these things. In for the context of crypto is that we can bring up, because so many things to do that we're not going to be able to do everything. Like, for example, if we're good in funds, we need someone that is good in custody. We need someone that is good in market making and things like that, right? And it's all about like, can we maybe help your business get into this position, or getting your business to step up or create a new division to do this, and we all excel together. And in one way, one day if we get there, we can all sit down and just reminiscence
laughing our Ferraris together. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. That's right.
There's not enough people think about that.
Absolutely, that's something that is very true and strong in our businesses, that we try to do things together and try and help each other out. So it's interesting hearing it come from an outside source like yourself.
Such a large company too.
Absolutely.
Like
we're not a big company. We're just humble Brisbane-based asset manager.
Well, you're getting there. You're just all over Skyline
and fully regulated.
Yeah.
Actually regulated. You can actually look us up on an AFSL registry. You can search Monochrome and you can see the license that we authorize under, what exactly the name of the product and things like that.
Yeah, cool.
So if anyone wants to find out more about Monochrome,
where do we go?
Where do we send them?
So I think there was another question about people entering the crypto market. So I think there's a lot of resources out there that you can look up. There is a paper called Fidelity Bitcoin First. Just Google it, Fidelity Bitcoin First. It's actually a very good starting point for how people should view Bitcoin in a sea of other crypto assets. Okay. Because it's very important to differentiate what the two things. One's Bitcoin, one's crypto, and sort of like we don't actually have the time to go through it today, unfortunately. But that report, exactly, that's the one. That report will tell you exactly.
We can keep going too if you want.
What I would like to sort of go on. We also do a lot of what we call CPD research on Monochrome's website and monochrome.au/research. That's something that we've compiled together to make it digestible for more towards the fiduciary and financial advice and things like that audiences. Cool. So might be a bit too technical for most people, and that's the one. So we talk about things like Bitcoin regulation, the basics to risk governance, the concepts of ESG, which just comes out a lot. So all these things are accredited by that basically have points for financial professionals to earn and things like that. Our website is just monochrome.au. That's sort of where you can find most of our content and stuff. I'm on Instagram, but my Instagram is private, so that's just because I want to get some work done sometimes. But sure. Obviously, you can always reach me. I check my messages once in a while and things like that. Not as active as Twitter anymore. I think Twitter has gone a bit too noisy. I never understood the point of getting those blue ticks and things like that, but story for another time. It's no longer valuable if everyone has it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's like right. You were talking about earlier. Like it's the belief process that a lot of people want it and not many people can have it, which makes it valuable. Now it's worth $15.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as doing a six pack. Like if it was easy and everyone had it, it wouldn't be desirable. That's why Beckett's got one.
Well, six pack of beer.
I'd say it's easier to get a six pack than to get a Lambo. So.
Yep, very true. True. I haven't got either.
No, cool. Well, I picked you up a little token of appreciation, Jeff, while I was in Japan. From a local Japanese artist there. We got you the 595.
Oh, thank you.
Signed by the team.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, hopefully that looks good in your office.
Oh, thank you very much.
And it wasn't easy find. What did you find first?
Oh, I found the 695.
Yeah.
And so I went to Auto Bucks, which is like the so it's like the Autobahn or Repco kind of thing of Japan, but it's like tenfold. Like they have everything there. Like you can get specialist tuned suspension setups for GTR Skylines off the shelf and they'll fit it the same day sort of thing.
6-packs.
Yeah, 6-packs. Yeah.
Really appreciate that. I love this.
No stress. Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate your time and all your insights. You've well and truly cooked these three.
Yeah.
Which I've got to stick a fork in them and flip them over.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
Your insights and everything you're doing, on your Instagram as well. Again, appreciate it. And, appreciate seeing another side to the crypto world.
Yeah. And
thanks for having me, and thanks for the invitation over here. It's a nice place you guys have here.
Always welcome, and we're looking forward to the next car cruise when we have one coming up soon. So you'll have an invite for sure.
Yep.
Stretch the legs on whatever car you decide to bring.
Yeah. And when you're in Sydney, I'd love to see the black one when you're at Sydney Motorsport Park with the GT3.
Yeah. All the best.
If you go on the road cruise app, this would probably only be allowed on a flatbed. You can't drive it on the road, unfortunately.
It's
race cars.
Potato. It's a grey area.
This is industrial. So.
It's semi-regulated.
I'll throw some hoops in it.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, for anyone who's watching along and who wants to follow the Supercar Stories stuff, you can find us on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, Supercar Stories podcast. If you want to catch up on what Jeff's been up to, you can see the full episode there if you're watching this on Reel. Or if you're watching this on TikTok or something, you can see the full episodes on YouTube. Watch the whole video. We'll catch you on the next episode. Cheers.
Cool.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.